Welcome to the PreSnap Podcast, presented by LineStar. We've got your preview of the NFC East. Alongside my co-host, Tyler Wiemann, I'm Shannon Sommerville. Tyler, it's division preview time, and now we're looking at the NFC East. Do you remember like a few years ago when the nickname for the NFC East was the NFC Least? And then last season, 3 of the 4 teams made it to the playoffs? What world are we living in?
I know, it's crazy. Literally, I think on this show last year, we're like, NFC Least, what are we doing here?
Exactly. And then the Giants of all teams, too, kind of came out of nowhere and performed over expectation there. So we've got a lot of teams to talk about here to see if they will perform as well as they did last year, so we'll talk win totals. We'll talk about some fantasy players that you need to watch, as well as some underdog fantasy season-long props that you can bet on Underdog Fantasy. If you don't already have Underdog Fantasy, make sure to download it. And when you do, use the promo code LineStar so you'll get up to $100 of your first deposit match. Also, before we do anything else, make sure to subscribe to the LineStar YouTube channel. If you haven't already, we've got a ton of content coming out, including our props videos. We come out with those every day, so make sure to subscribe to the channel. Sign up for notifications as well, because we do our daily prop shows, and coming up for football season, we'll have that as well. And you want to make sure you hop on some of our bets and tail us right when the lines come out, because sometimes they change and stuff. So notifications are a crucial part of that whole process. Tyler, I'm excited for football season. Man, this summer is flying by. We're already talking about football around the corner. We're going to be in training camp soon. Oh, man. We got a lot to talk about here.
MLB All-Star break is only a couple weeks away. We are pretty much in full football swing already.
And I don't know if you paid attention to the shirt that I am wearing. I purposefully wore my Georgia Bulldogs National Championship long sleeve t-shirt for this occasion, because we will be talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, aka the Philadelphia Bulldogs, who have 6 Georgia Bulldogs on their team this year. Yeah, I think that might lean heavy in their favor in terms of me predicting their win totals for this season. What do you think, Tyler?
It's not just because you're always cold.
I mean that too, but you know, go Dogs. All right, speaking of go Dogs, let's get into our NFC East preview. We will go in terms of the favorite to win the division and then go down from there. So we're going to start things off with the Philadelphia Eagles, who last year narrowly lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. A miraculous season for the Philadelphia Eagles, finishing with a 14-3 record. They have the second best odds to win the Super Bowl, and they're the favorites to win the NFC and the NFC East in this one. All right, so last year, Jalen Hurts did some pretty phenomenal things. What is your overall impression of this Philadelphia Eagles team now with a new offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator?
Yeah, I mean, losing their coordinators from last year definitely, puts a different little wrinkle on this. But I think this team just has so much talent, and, they should be probably the second best odds to win the Super Bowl and favorites to win the NFC East. So I like this team a lot. And I mean, as an offense for fantasy, you definitely want a piece.
That's for sure. Let's take a look at some notable offseason moves here, just to keep it fresh in our mind here. Remember, they added Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith in the first round of this year's draft. They do lose Miles Sanders, the running back. However, they gained a DeAndre Swift, another Bulldog, to the mix there, coming over from the Detroit Lions. They also signed running back Rashad Penny. He was the Seahawks' former first-round pick, and their new offensive coordinator is Brian Johnson. New defensive coordinator is Sean Desai. So looking to become the first team to win back-to-back NFC East champs since the Eagles did it 4 straight years from 2001 to 2004. My question to you is, will they make it back to the playoffs? That might be kind of an obvious question. I guess the bigger question is, do you think Jalen Hurts will repeat the things that he did last season?
Yes, I think Jalen Hurts works hard enough that we don't have to worry about him, falling off a cliff or something like that. I think he will be just fine this year. And, maybe some offenses can keep up with them a little bit. So he has to play in the second half.
Yeah,
And by play, I mean stay aggressive in the second half.
He's got to earn that contract he just got for himself, $255 million contract there. Anybody stand out to you in terms of fantasy value heading into either underdog best ball drafts or it can be season-long fantasy?
Well, I think the quarterback position as a whole right now is being a little bit overdrafted, and quarterbacks are just going off the board a lot earlier. So I don't love Hurts. However, it's Jalen Hurts, and the numbers he can put up, it's obviously great. But I love this whole offense, and I love getting pieces of it. In best ball, one of the things I think is really interesting is this running back room. There's no Miles Sanders. He was great for them last year, but now we have DeAndre Swift. We got Rashad Penny, and then Kenneth Gainwell is still there. And with Swift and Penny, you're talking about two backs that everybody thinks these two are going to, kind of carry the load. But these two guys are also very injury prone. And a guy like Kenny Gainwell is going at the very end of drafts. And we know Philadelphia likes them. So he could be a really, really good late round pick.
All right. So some good options there. Win total for the Philadelphia Eagles, 11.5. You think they go over?
I'm going to have to go over.
Yeah, same. I mean, they're just so stacked. When you even just looking at the offense, everywhere. They got dogs, bulldogs everywhere. They also have a pretty dynamic offense. We haven't even talked about the wide receivers, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown back there. I think that it's going to be the revenge tour for Jalen Hurts and that offense to get back to the Super Bowl once again. Are there any underdog season-long bets that you are eyeing?
Yeah, you just mentioned one of them, Devonta Smith, higher than 1,000.5 yards. The man had 1,196 yards last year. That was his second year in the league. He's coming into his year 3 now. He should be primed to at least get close to matching that or higher. I think Smith is an excellent receiver. In another year in this league, I think gives him a real good spot to be over 1,000 once again.
Yeah, I saw that one as well, and I love taking higher on that one for sure, especially since he's got such good rapport with Jalen Hurts. He looked to him a lot in those crucial third down situations late in games, and just when he needed to get a first down, it seemed like he went to Devontae Smith a whole lot there. So I love that play.
A ton. And some of that might just because they already had chemistry from the year before, but I think he really likes Smith, and I think Smith is a really good receiver.
Absolutely. You know who else is a pretty good receiver? Dallas Goddard, who's actually a tight end, but I actually like the over on 645.5 receiving yards for him, which you might think I'm a little crazy because, hey, this is an offense that's predicated on running the ball. Jalen Hurts is there, and they've got all of these weapons that we just talked about, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. So why am I taking the higher here? Well, because he missed 5 games last season and still had over 700 receiving yards. Dallas Goddard is an absolute monster, and 6'5", 250. He's the tight end build. He can get it done. He's been phenomenal. And the way teams have been employing tight ends in their offenses, we saw it all last year. If you followed along with us on the show here, we took a lot of tight end receiving props for good reason because teams are really starting to lean into the mismatches they can create with their tight ends. Specifically, Dallas Goddard creates a huge mismatch problem for a lot of teams, and I think they're going to lean into that again. This year, I'm taking Dallas Goddard over 645.5 receiving yards. What do you think about Goddard?
I like that one also. I also like his touchdown number. I think it was 4.5, and I think that's a little low. I mean, as you said, he missed a lot of games last year, and I think he had 4 touchdowns. The year before, he had 5, and he was barely used that year before. So I think that 4.5 number is probably too low for him for his size and strength. So.
Absolutely. All right. Fly, Eagles, fly. We're both on board for them going over their win total, and we've got some good plays for you there on Underdog Fantasy. If you don't already have that app, again, download it. Use the promo code LineStar for up to $100 of your deposit matched. All right. Now let's move along to the Dallas Cowboys, who've had kind of an up and down kind of a last couple of years. 12-5 is what they finished last year. They have pretty good odds to win the NFC East. However, it just seems like they can never kind of quite get over the hump out of the NFC. They did make some moves this offseason, notably Tony Pollard. They gave them the franchise tag, and they said goodbye to Ezekiel Elliott, who had the worst yards per touch average in the league. I think a lot of Dallas Cowboys fans were ready for that to happen, and essentially at the end of last season, Tony Pollard was the RB1 there. He was the league leader in yards per touch. And then they signed cornerback Stephon Gilmore. They also signed, big signing here for fantasy purposes, wide receiver Brandon Cooks. They did lose Dalton Schultz, though, the tight end, to free agency. How do you view the Cowboys this season?
I mean, I think their defense, there is room to improve on that defense with the guys they have. But I think a lot of these moves are just kind of going lateral. They're not really improving that much as a team. And
that's a good point. And one of the things from an offensive perspective, too, that you have to take into consideration is the fact that their offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, is no longer there. Mike McCarthy will now be calling the plays on offense. What do you think about how that will impact things?
I mean, it'll be interesting. You know, a lot of people aren't too high on McCarthy as a coach as a whole, and now him having the play calling, you know, I think a lot of people may be down on that. But, you know, he's had productive offenses in Green Bay. Wouldn't be surprised if he's doing just fine here calling the plays as well.
Yeah, I mean, his philosophy is just to run the ball, which they actually did quite a bit anyways with Kellen Moore.
Yeah,
so.
And I think it's kind of interesting because I don't think Tony Pollard can be the true workhorse back. So I do think somebody else is going to have to step up and have a decent role. I know in the games that Zeke missed last year, you know, Pollard was talking about just being totally exhausted towards the end of games. And so if they're giving him that role the whole entire season, where he's getting, you know, 17, 18 rushes and he's still getting his receptions, like I think he'll just break down. So, and I think they know that, so they're not going to give him that full role, but I think he's still going to have a very, very good role in this offense.
So for fantasy purposes, are there any guys that you think are overvalued, undervalued? What's your assessment?
I still think Tony Pollard is probably slightly undervalued. CeeDee Lamb, I just have a real hard time clicking that where he's being drafted. I think the tight end situation for the Cowboys is very interesting because Dalton Schultz left. Yes, Brandon Cooks will take some of, you know, those targets, but there's still plenty of room. You know, the Cowboys had Hendershot and Ferguson. If one of those two is able to kind of be the guy, there should be a lot of volume for him that Dalton Schultz has vacated. So
yeah, absolutely. So there are some opportunities there. And what do you think about any underdog season-long props here?
I mean, I was just talking about him. I got to go Tony Pollard over 1,025 rushing yards. Like I said, I don't think he is going to get into that, you know, 17, 18 carry average. Yeah. However, I think he will be 13-ish carries, which is 23 carries more than he had last year. And last year he broke 1,000. So I think he has a good shot of breaking it again. I do expect his average, which was 5.2 last year, to maybe come down a little bit just with the added volume and the added workload, both with carrying the ball and receiving the ball. So maybe, you know, that 5.2 number comes down a little bit closer to 5 or 4.8, something like that. But it should still be enough to get him over this 1,025 and a half number.
And you got to like Pollard, not only for your prop, but for fantasy as well, just in hearing Mike McCarthy speak about how he wants the offense to run this season and run the ball more. And he made some comments about how Kellen Moore just really wanted to light up the scoreboard. And as a head coach, it's his role to also make sure the defense rests as well. And that's something that he'll be emphasizing with his offense going into this. So I really like that play there for.
And look, there is room. Like I'm saying, I like it at 13 carries.
Mm-hmm.
There is a very good shot he goes over that. And, maybe his body is able to hold up, knowing that he's going to get that training differently in the offseason to be able to handle that workload. There is that shot. And if he is like a true workhorse, he could be a top 5 pick.
So another component that we haven't talked too much about is their newest wide receiver, Brandon Cooks. And Tyler, I'm curious what you think of my play here. I'm going Brandon Cooks higher than 775.5 receiving yards. He had over 1,000 yards in 6 of the last 8 seasons, including 2 of the last 3 with Houston, which is one of the worst offenses in the leagues, and had the worst quarterback play in the league. Now he gets Dak Prescott. What do you make of Brandon Cooks and his role in this Dallas offense?
Yeah, I think he's going to be just fine. There's a lot of mouths to feed as far as Gallup, Cooks, and CD. But 775 really is not very high for a guy of his caliber that is able to get 1,000, fairly easily, even on bad teams. So I don't mind it whatsoever. And I think Cooks is going to be an interesting piece of this offense.
Yeah. All right. Let's move along then to the New York Giants, who surprised everyone in the NFL last season. They finished with a 9-7 record, but there was at the beginning of the season, I believe they started out 7-2 to start off. Well, this season, there's kind of mixed views on how they will end up this season. I've seen a couple media, pundits out there thinking that they're going to go under their win total and maybe just regress a bit. However, here are some notable offseason moves that they did make. Now, they did lock up Danny Dimes. They also traded for Darren Waller, the tight end, and they drafted Tennessee wide receiver Jalen Hyatt, as well as signing wide receivers Paris Campbell and Jamison Crowder. All right, Tyler, my question to you is quite simple. Did the Giants get better this offseason?
Yeah. I mean, they didn't get worse, and it's another year with the same coach and a majority of the team sticking together. So there's just more cohesiveness to the team as a whole.
Right. And, I mean, Brian Daboll, Coach of the Year, knew what he was doing last season, certainly. So they did give a few more weapons to Danny Dimes, who had an unbelievable season last year. Let's talk about his performance for fantasy purposes. Do you expect him to get better this season? What is your, prognosis for him this season?
Yeah, I think he is going to be able to repeat last year, maybe actually do a little bit better towards the end of the year. They allowed him to throw the ball a little bit more. And the team as a whole, the offense kind of was really clicking. So I think Danny Dimes will be able to repeat. He also has that nice shiny new toy in Darren Waller. So I think with having, at least one solid option, it's going to help that offense as a whole.
They also got the quad father back there. Don't forget about him. Saquon Barkley is back last season. We had talked about it before the season started in our preview shows back then. Hey, watch out for Saquon. He's now going to be another year healthy from that ACL injury, and sure enough, he went off last season. What are you expecting for him heading into 2023?
I mean, I think he's in a great spot to have another really good year. I expect him to do really well. And, I know we're going to talk about it later, so I might as well do it here. I think his line on Underdog is straight up disrespectful. They put him at 975.5 rushing yards.
Yeah.
And he had 1,300 last year. Like I think that number is just absolutely crazy. He's another year removed from serious injury, and I think he's going to have a similar year as he did last.
Yes, definitely. So keep an eye on Saquon this year, that's for sure. He's just been really fun to watch from a fantasy perspective. Taking a look at the offense, the wide receivers last year, that room was decimated, yet there was still someone kind of popping up and emerging. It seemed like they just got it done. Who do you see stepping up at the wide receiver position for the Giants this season?
So I think that it's going to be a lot like it was towards the end of last year, where every week there were 3, 4 guys that were all really good values, and any one of them could go off. I think it's going to kind of be like that once again at wide receiver, where, you got Darius Slayton, he'll have his games. You got Isaiah Hodgins, he'll have his. I think they're pretty much just going to be spreading the ball to all of them, and each one is going to have their day based on the matchup.
Now, got to talk about Darren Waller. When he is healthy, he is a weapon. He got a bit overshadowed last season because he played on an offense with Devontae Adams. I mean, you can understand that.
Yeah.
Do you think he has a breakout performance for fantasy owners this season?
Yeah, and not only did he have Adams, he also had Hunter Renfrow that plays in the same area as Waller. So I think this situation for Waller, and we've seen him, be a target hog at times with Derek Carr, and I think he can do the same thing on this team. And with his athletic profile, his ability, if he's getting 10 plus targets a game, which I totally think he could be getting, you're talking about a guy that's an absolute steal in drafts right now.
Well, as we're talking about the pass catchers here on this Giants offense, I'm going to go ahead and tell you my underdog fantasy season-long pick is going to be Isaiah Hodgins, higher than 425.5 receiving yards. This is one of my riskier picks. He only had 392 last season. I just love his story. He spent time in years prior on the Bills practice squad, but then got the opportunity last year with Brian Daboll, who brought him back. He ended up being kind of a go-to for Danny Dimes. 8 passes, 105 yards, and a touchdown in the playoff win over Minnesota. That was their first playoff win since 2012 in the Super Bowl. And his 15.3% catch rate over expected when aligned wide ranked second best in the NFL last season. I think he's an underrated wide receiver. He's also very tall, and I think that could benefit him in a lot of situations going into this year. He just has a nice frame. He can get up there for that ball. I like Isaiah Hodgins here, even though, yes, I know he will be competing with a few other people here, but I think he could be wide receiver 1 for them. What are your thoughts there? Am I crazy? Am I taking crazy pills?
No, I mean, like I said, we really don't know who it's going to be. I think Hodgins has a good spot, a good chance of being it. Darius Slayton has a good chance of being it. And we know those two were at least there last year, and they have some rapport with Danny Dimes.
All right, so that's the New York Giants for you. Their win total 7.5. Tyler, what do you think about that? Higher or lower? I'm not personally betting this, by the way, but
I don't think it's a line that I would be betting too, but I think they got to get at least 8. I think Daboll's a good coach, and with that, I just don't see him having a losing season.
Sure. I'm conflicted on this one because last year I said all season long that the Giants were going to keep losing, and they kept winning. But the only thing that concerns me is that last season there's this luck metric that is an actual thing. It's an actual metric. And the luckiest team last year in the NFL by the luck metric was the Minnesota Vikings. But the second luckiest was the New York Giants. So I do figure there might be some regression. And I think their strength of schedule is pretty tough. They have to play teams from the AFC East. They have to play the Jets. They've got a really tough road stretch, kind of like towards the beginning of the season. I think this is going to be tough for them. I don't know that they made themselves that much better with any of their moves this offseason. I see regression in their future. I don't necessarily know if I can really confidently say they can get to 8 wins.
Yeah, I mean, it can absolutely happen. All year. I mean, you and I were both kind of saying, like, how are they doing this? How are they staying in the game? But I think it's partly because of coaching. And, Daboll knew their inefficiencies and just kind of worked around them. And now the offense is a little bit better, a little more cohesion to, them just growing with the same system for another year. But yeah, I mean, they're a mediocre team, so.
All right, well, let's go from one mediocre team to another. The Washington Commanders finished last season 8-8, and were the only team in the NFC East last year to not make the playoffs. They narrowly missed it. And this is an interesting team for us to look at, I think, because I think there's obviously a lot going on here. Ron Rivera, the head coach, is likely on the hot seat. They're selling the team. There's just a lot going on. Who's going to be the quarterback right now? Is it Sam Howell? What's going to happen here? What intrigues you about the Washington Commanders, maybe from a fantasy perspective? Is there anything?
Unfortunately, not really that much. We know they want to run the ball, so their running backs are a little interesting. However, I don't see the offense scoring a ton, so it takes a little wind out of the sails of the running backs, and they obviously aren't a huge fan of Antonio Gibson, even though he is a dynamic running back. So not really. It's really hard to figure out what this team's going to do.
Exactly. Quickly, let's go over some offseason moves that I forgot to mention. They have a new offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy, coming over from the Kansas City Chiefs, where he kind of had to be in the shadow of Andy Reid over there. Now he gets to call the shots with the Washington Commanders. That could be an interesting piece. They did release running back J.D. McKissick. They did sign quarterback Jacoby Brissett from the Bills, he's coming off the best season of his career with the Browns. And they did add a couple offensive linemen, center Nick Gates and tackle Andrew Wiley, just worth mentioning there. I do think the piece that is significant of the offseason moves that they've made is that Eric Bieniemy piece. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting for sure. And he's been a really good coordinator for years. I'm always wary, though, when there's these coordinators that have a Patrick Mahomes or, one of the elite quarterbacks that pretty much ends up running the show as it is. It seems like for whatever reason, the NFL coaching circle absolutely loves these guys, but they're most of the time in the perfect situation. Yes. Andy Reid, who is an extremely good coach, raves about Bieniemy. So I think you have to trust Andy Reid there, and that it will be beneficial to the Commanders. But the Commanders are in a world of hurt. They're going with a second-year quarterback. Their only real weapon is
a fifth rounder at that from last year's draft.
And a fifth rounder. Their only real weapon is Scary Terry, and I think they might have a trouble running the ball or moving the ball, I should say.
From a fantasy perspective, not a lot here to like. There's nothing that stands out to me on Underdog Fantasy for their season-long props. As a whole, looking at their season, I think the thing that keeps them intriguing from a bettor's perspective in terms of win totals, things like this, or maybe like a long shot to make the playoffs, would be their defense. I think that's an interesting component of this. And Ron Rivera is essentially playing for his job this season, and he's a defensive guy, and that defense is good. Deron Payne is good. Could Chase Young start to look like what we thought he was going to look like? This defense could keep them in the season in this. And they, last year they almost made the playoffs, and they did it. How many quarterbacks did they run out there last year? 3? Yeah. Was it 3, I think? So that is something that intrigues me about this team. Could they make the play? Could they stay afloat with that defense, and then just, Eric Bieniemy puts a couple pieces together where they start to click a little bit on offense to where they can win some games. We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, I get it. I could see them being a dark horse, yes, because of that defense. But if I had to bet their win total, I think I would go under.
All right, so fading the Commanders there. I'm not sure about the win total. I'm staying away from it. 6.5. I think there are some winnable games, though. I think there are a couple winnable. So I'm gonna go over. You know what? I'm gonna lean into the dark horse nature of this, and got to take some shots here on the PreSnap podcast. So we'll lean into it. I like Ron Rivera as a coach, and certainly
Riverboat Ron. I like him as well, but I don't love that offense.
All right, so let's talk about the NFC East as a whole. Who do you got emerging as?
Eagles.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't see a situation. Cowboys, maybe? I don't know. I think the Eagles are just way too stacked.
Yeah.
So much talent on that team.
Yeah.
Their offseason, they got better, which is crazy. You know, when a team goes to the Super Bowl, it's like,
Yeah.
all right, what pieces are going to be gone? Are they going to get that same cohesive unit back? And they did lose a few pieces. However, they managed, I think, to get better. Like, the guys they got in the draft are insane. I just think this is going to be a really fun team to watch. And especially as a Georgia Bulldogs fan, seeing so many of those guys that won a national championship now head out there on Sundays for the Eagles.
Yeah, I think this is one of the only divisions, that you can clearly say one team is going to win it.
Above all. All right, so we both agree on that one. It is fly, Eagles fly for that. And all right, so that's going to do it for our NFC East preview. It's always good to kind of talk football, talk some of these win totals, just to kind of get our minds right as we start to head into our fantasy drafts, whether you're doing underdog fantasy or getting ready for maybe your season-long fantasy draft. It's always a good thing. Also, make sure right now to check out LineStarApp.com. It's where you can optimize your lineup for daily fantasy during the season. We also have a props AI tool that you can check out as well that we will be featuring a lot on our props shows. So much fun. Make sure to check out LineStarApp.com and do us a huge favor. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, comment below. Let us know what you think about the NFC East this year. Who will emerge victorious? Who do you think will have great seasons? Let us know what you think of our bets. If you have any others, drop them in the comments. We're all trying to win some money here, so let us know in the comments. That's going to do it for us today on the PreSnap Podcast. Good luck in all of your betting endeavors. Stay tuned to the channel, and we'll see you guys next time.
Have a good one, guys. Bye.